just try to clean this and adulterate.
Adulterate means to like
What?
contaminate.
That's easy.
Adulterate is like to contaminate. Like to adulterate the thing, yeah. Make unclean.
Amble.
Amble? I like amble, that's a good word. It means to sort of like stroll or walk in a casual way. Like G-A-M-B-O-L is a good synonym for it. Gamble. Not gambling, gambling like a synonym with G-A-M-B-O. Like a percentile one.
Oh, I don't know this. I'm more of history.
Yeah, me too. Okay, everyone finished? Yeah? Alright. So what we're working on now in this class is a portfolio. And a portfolio is going to contain all these stories, and they're going to be helpful for you when we do the SAT. So what I want you to do in sort of like the back part of your notebook, like go like to the very last page and maybe go like 10 pages back. And what we're going to do is that's going to be your portfolio. And it's going to have all the various good examples of like stories and people, right? That way, again, my whole thing is like, don't talk about Helen Keller or Steve Jobs or Thomas Edison. Not that these people are bad. I love the deaf, the blind, and the mute. But, we want to have something a little bit more unique to understand it. So like, yeah, just go to like, your notebook and then like 10 pages back, and then just so we can use these stories to help you build your examples. Because if you go to page 18 of your, what do we call in this book? Oh, Strategies and Tactics. If you go to page 18 of the Strategies and Tactics book, right? Basically, all SAT prompts, they can be categorized into 7 different topics. And we'll discuss in a minute, right? But these are the main topics, that they fall into on page 18. So what we're going to do is we're just going to build this portfolio, and it will help you, before you take the test, you can just look back at it and say, oh yeah, I remember Harrison Bergeron, right? And this is to jog your memory, because otherwise you might forget. So let's just talk about this story, that way we can have this down in your notes. So title, what's the title of the story? Harrison Bergeron. I'm asking all the hard questions here today. Every classroom I go into is bad markers. Ooh, that's nice. Alright. Harrison Bergeron. Who's the author? Kurt Vonnegut. Kurt Vonnegut. Alright, so write this down in your notebook. Kurt, V-O-N-N-E-G-U-T, Vonnegut. Alright, who's Kurt Vonnegut? You know who this guy is?
Author.
He's an author, wow. Fantastic answer. Anything else? He's a writer. He's an author and a writer. That's it. He's a pretty interesting dude. And he only died a couple years ago. He wrote mostly in the 1950s and 60s. But his most famous work is a book called Slaughterhouse-Five. It's a really good book. And you don't have to write this part down in your notebook, but I just want you to know about it. It's an important work, and it's a good book. It's short if you ever want to read it. It's very short and easy to read. But basically, it's a book that sort of discusses the Dresden bombings. And but it's not in the sort of normal way, it's also got like aliens and time travel in it. It's pretty interesting. Do you know where Dresden is? Where's Dresden? Any idea? Not up on the ceiling, if that's what you're thinking. Yeah. Dresden is in Germany. So during World War II, who were the people in Germany? The Nazis, right? I hope I'm not asking you hard questions here. Right, the Nazis, right. They weren't the nicest fellows, now were they? So basically, you have to keep that in mind. So during the war, the US and Britain, they decided that they were going to bomb this German town, Dresden. But the thing is, Dresden was kind of not affiliated with the war. It was just kind of a random small town. And what happened, Kurt Vonnegut, he was a POW. You know what a POW is?
Prisoner of war. Prisoner
of war. He was a prisoner of war in Dresden as the US forces bombed it. And they just bombed the city to the ground, even though it didn't have much to do with the war effort. So it's a pretty horrible thing to do. And so he wrote this story about it to sort of reflect on it. And he couldn't write about it right away because you can't say, oh, we did bad things to Germany right after World War II, right? Because they were the Nazis. But this book kind of shows that like on all sides, evil was being done. So it's a really good book, and I recommend you check it out because this is his most famous work. But let's talk about Harrison Bergeron. So Harrison Bergeron, when's the setting of this story? 2081. But again, you don't really know all this. You just say it's set in the future, right? Set in the future, distant future, right? What country?
America.
America. Set in America. Set in America. Future America. What kind of society is it? Huh? Equal society. What's it called when the government or when a person tries to make society perfect?
Communist.
Not communist, but close. Euphemism is just a nicer way of saying things. But you're close. Utopia. Right. It's a utopia. Right? It's supposed to be a utopic, you know, right? Emphasis on equality, right? Everybody is equal, right? Forcibly equal, right? Forced to be equal. Tennis, forced equality. So, for example, if you are real strong, right? You're a real big guy, real strong. What do they do to you? Yeah, they put you in chains, right? So, you know, they weigh down the strong. Right? Now, what about if you're real smart? In your ear, what's in your ear? Yeah, buzzers. It's like a little radio. Let's just call it. I like to think about it like it's like kind of like a little alarm, you know. A radio, a buzzer. You know, buzzer's actually a better word to be honest. Yeah, buzzer. One thing too. Did you notice? Is it the same sound every time? No. Why is it not the same sound every time? Yeah, exactly. You get used to it. You know, so you know, it's always something different. You know, and Hazel always wants to know what's the difference. So who are our two main characters in the story? George and Hazel. Are they married?
Yes.
Yes, they're married. Right, George and Hazel. It's okay. It's not the biggest fact to mess up. It's not a big deal. So, George and Hazel. What handicap does George have?
Brain.
Right, he's got that alarm, right? He's got the alarm. What about Hazel? She got nothing, right? Hazel is about as smart as a bag of rocks. You know, we see this in the story. There's a lot of times, right? She's not too bright. She's kind of like the perfect citizen in this society, right? She doesn't have anything. And so, that's pretty interesting. As the story goes on, let me find my pages here, right? Each person's handicapped. Even when you're at home, do you have to wear these handicaps? What happens if you were to take off these handicaps? Yeah, he'd go to jail for maybe a couple years. So he can't take them off. You're always forced to be equal. So, very nice. And then they're watching TV, and who appears on their television? Good old Harrison Bergeron. I was about to say Harrison Barnes. Man, that's a UNC basketball reference for you right there. Harrison Bergeron, yeah. So let's describe Harrison. Good old HB, Harrison. All right, Harrison. How old is Harrison? 14. Yeah, it's 14. I like thinking about how old Harrison is. I like thinking about Harrison's age because you know he's pretty strangely described. How old are you guys? How old are you, Justin? 19. How old are you, Mr. Edwin? 18?
17.
Whatever you want to tell me is fine. 17, 18, yeah? 17? 17?
19.
19?
17.
19? 17?
You're 19?
16, okay. Whatever.
Mine was 17.
I like to think about this because Harrison is 14. You know? So you guys, you're older than Harrison apparently. But let's listen to this description of Harrison, right? So, a police photograph on page 10, right? Are we on page 10 of this story? A police photograph of Harrison Bergeron was flashed on the screen upside down, and sideways, upside down again, then right side up. Do you know why they mention this? Because the person doing the job is doing a terrible job. It's kind of funny. Yeah. The picture showed the full length of Harrison against a background calibrated in feet and inches. He was exactly 7 feet tall. 7 feet tall. Okay. How many centimeters is 7 feet tall? Because I mean, you guys, you're centimeter people.
220.
220? I don't know, honestly. Yeah, like 220. A beast. There's this dude I see around town, and he's like 7'3", and like when I'm next to him, it's like I'm pretty tall, man. I'm just like, dude. I call this guy the tree, by the way. He's like, I was like, this tree man's here. I always run into him when I go out. You know, the tree is here. He reminds me, you know, Lord of the Rings, those trees, the Ents. Seems exactly. I was like, man, this guy's tall. My friend almost got into a fight with this guy. I was like, what, are you serious? This guy is as tall as Earth. Don't get into a fight with that guy. So anyway, yeah. That's a different story. Right, he's 7 feet tall, and then look down here, right? His list of handicaps, right? The rest of Harrison's appearance was Halloween and hardware. It's such a good rhyme. Halloween hardware. You can imagine it's like Halloween outfit, right? Nobody had ever borne heavier handicaps. He'd outgrown hindrances faster than HG men could think of them. Instead of a little ear radio for mental handicap, he wore a tremendous pair of earphones and spectacles with thick, wavy lenses. The spectacles were intended to make him not only half-blind, but to give him wanging headaches besides. Scrap metal was hung all over him. Ordinarily, there was a certain symmetry, a military neatness to the handicaps issued to strong people. But Harrison looked like a walking junkyard. This is good imagery. This is kind of imagery you want, right? Like a walking junkyard. You kind of see it right, all this terrible, crappy metal, right? In the race of life, Harrison carried 300 pounds, right? And then I like this where he takes off all of his handicaps, right? And if you go to the middle of the next page, he has this rubber ball nose, he's got flat caps on his teeth, he's got all this junk, right? But down here it says, he flung away his rubber ball nose, revealed a man that would have awed Thor, the god of thunder. So I kind of picture this in my mind, because we know what Thor looks like. You guys have seen Avengers, so you know that guy, So this is crazy. Does he sound like a real believable 14-year-old to you? Yeah, not too much, but we can suspend our disbelief, right? So we have Harrison, and what does Harrison do? He
king.
Not just king, man. He's not a loser. Kings are losers. Emperors, yeah. A king gets one country. An emperor gets an empire. Right? You don't want to be a king. You want to be an emperor. Right. He declares himself emperor. Right. He declares himself emperor. And what does he do? His first act as emperor. He grabs a ballerina and what? Basically he marries. He rips off all of her handicaps as well. And I love this line right here at the bottom of page 11, right? She was blindingly beautiful, right? I sort of picture this in my mind. Sort of like the opposite of Medusa. That's what I think. Medusa, right? When it turns out everyone was stone. So I sort of see that. The image in my mind, I just sort of picture Talking Head when I picture this blindingly beautiful. So, awesome. Alright, so what happens? So they're dancing, and they're sort of defying the laws of gravity. And they float up to this ceiling, and as they're floating down, what happens? With what?
Double barrel.
Double barrel shotgun, right? Look, one of the things I really like about this story, is, right, Vonnegut doesn't say, oh, they got shot with a gun, right? But you can see this, like this big shotgun, they're dead before they go. These really strong images, right? This is what I was telling you yesterday. Remember, what was that thing? Tell, not show? Tell, not show, right? Show, not tell. Thank you, yes. Show, not tell. And this is what Vonnegut is so good at. It's creating this imagery, right? The show, not tell, right? They get killed. And so at the end of the story, I think it's just real sad, right? So during this time, Hazel's watching this on TV, and George, he'd gone out, and he left the room, and he was coming back in. And let's look at this last page on 13, right? He says, "You've been crying?" he said to Hazel. "Yep," she said. "What about?" he said. "I forget," she said. "Something real sad on television." "What was it?" he said. "It's all kind of mixed up in my mind," said Hazel. "Forget sad things," said George. "I always do," said Hazel. "That's my girl," said George. He winced. There was the sound of a riveting gun in his head. You know what a riveting gun is? When they put metal on it, it's like doo-doo-doo-doo-doo, but it's really, really, really loud, right? "Gee, I could tell that one was a doozy," said Hazel. "You can say that again," said George. "Gee," said Hazel, "I can tell that one was a doozy." Hazel ain't bright, man. You know why people say you can say that again? It's just like an expression. It's just like, if you say, "Oh man, you look really tired today," I said, "Yeah, you can say that again." You say, it's like, "Oh yeah, I agree with you." You never say, "Oh, you look tired." So her saying that at the end, it just shows how stupid she is. It's a very common expression in America. So it just kind of it means I agree. So this is the main part of the story, and so it's kind of interesting to pick out what exactly is Vonnegut's theme. What's his message? What's he trying to say? Is he trying to say that this is a good society that people should live in? No. Nah, that's not his theme, is it? On the other hand, is he saying that, people like Harris and Bergeron should be allowed to declare themselves emperor? No, it's very balanced. It's very nuanced. Right? This is one of my key words for you that I'm going to say it probably 15,000 times during the next month. What's a nuance? I used to make fun of my history teacher when I was in high school because he always said this word nuance. What's a nuance?
Tone.
Huh?
Tone.
Tone? No.
Message.
No. Close though. And by close, not really. Close-ish. A nuance is sort of like a subtle balance, right? It's a little bit of this and a little bit of that, right? It kind of contains both elements because in the real world, like things aren't black and white, right? They're gray. So when someone who picks up the nuances of an argument, they understand both sides, right? Both sides of the story, sort of examining the nuances, the subtleties between it, right? So mark down this word nuance. And this theme is very nuanced, right? Vonnegut isn't advocating a society like this. Really, what he's saying is like, we kind of have to be somewhere in between. We need to protect ourselves from people like Harrison Bergeron. Because there have been Harrison Bergerons all through history. Can you think of other people like Harrison Bergeron? Who else? Hitler. Who else?
Stalin.
Huh? Stalin. Napoleon, right? There are people like this, and we can't let them run amok either. They too are scary. So like, if I were to say what his theme was, it's like, something like maybe competition is okay, or competition is good even, but we must beware of the Harrison Bergerons. Something like that. That's kind of the real theme of this story. So, because there's a good little thing about competition as well. And, if you go back to page 10, he's on page 10. And it's talking about the television announcer, right? And so the television program, the news burst on, right? This happens. The television program was suddenly interrupted for a news bulletin. It wasn't clear at first as to what the bulletin was about, since the announcer, like all announcers, had a serious speech impediment. What's a speech impediment? When somebody stutters, stutters like like hello, right, like that. That's a speech impediment, right? For about half a minute, and in this high state of excitement, the announcer tried to say, "Ladies and gentlemen." So there's been breaking news, right? And the announcers are like, "Ladies and right, like that." You can't say it, right? That's all right, Hazel said of the announcer. He tried. That's the big thing. He tried his best. He could do the best he could do with what God gave him. He should get a nice raise for trying so hard. And like we kind of had that thing going on in our society, right? I'm sure you guys have seen like on sports teams, right, when you're a kid, right? You have the one kid, he's really great, but everybody else gets a participation trophy, right? You know what I mean? Oh, you showed up, Danny, here, you get the award, right? So there's this sort of thing, you get trophies, you get rewarded even though you didn't actually do anything. You know what I'm talking about, right? This isn't crazy. What do you think about that idea, Mr. Justin?
Giving trophies to all.
Yeah, just for people who show up to participate. You play sports, right? What's your sport?
Play American football and rugby.
Okay, let's talk about football. That's my sport. I love that sport. Okay. Would you give the worst guy on your team a trophy just because he came to practice every time? Do you think he deserves a trophy?
No.
How about the hardest working guy?
Yeah.
Definitely, right? I mean, that guy's out there training. He's the guy who brings you to the championship or at least wins some games, right? But still, we do this in our society. It's kind of an interesting thing. We reward everyone. What do you think?
Yeah, I should give all trophy.
Give everyone trophies. Why?
Because they worked it. They worked hard.
They worked hard.
Yeah.
So what happens in the real world? Let's say when you become an adult, and you can't do your job well. Hey, you're a doctor and you've killed 25 people, but you tried so hard. What are those family members going to say?
There's like different cases.
But that's the idea though, right? That's what people are afraid of, that like giving these children the trophies now is going to create adults who are going to need this validation, what validation is, need this like praise. So, and sometimes, but I don't know, if you give a trophy to everyone on the team, it could build teamwork. I don't know, either way. There's many ways to look at this thing. I believe in trophies for no one, and that, everyone should just get punishments all the time. So the guy who did the best, he can have the smallest punishment, and the guy who did the worst gets the biggest punishment. That's the motivation. I'm joking. Alright, but let's go back here, right, and go to page 18 on this prompt here, right? This is our list of SAT prompts, right? So what I hope you did is you took down, right, you didn't need this part of the note, but you took down this, right? Because you can, the night before you take the test or a few days before, you can look back at this notebook. Oh yeah, I remember Harrison Bergeron, he had that crazy kid, the handicaps, all that kind of stuff, right? Don't forget that word handicaps, that's kind of important to remember. All the handicaps. But anyway, we got, these are the various types of SAT prompts. You have success, and this is breakdown down some categories. Community, pass, knowledge, morals, values, identity, and happiness. So if the essay prompt was asking you a question like success, like maybe, do you need to struggle to be successful? Could we use this story as kind of an example for success? No? Maybe not so much. I think you're probably right. What about perseverance? Maybe not. But how about, let's look at the next one. The community versus the individual. Absolutely, right? Community, and there's lots of things like that. Like there's, one of the essay prompts I've seen is like, should someone go against community values even if it poses a risk to themselves, right? So what I would do underneath your little summary of these bullet points, I would just put star, and I would say community versus individual, right? Community versus individual. So in your notebook, little star, community versus individual, underneath your bullet points about the story. Good essay type, right? Now let's look at the next one. The past versus modernity. Is this a kind of an appropriate, relevant story? Maybe. I'm not so sure. But I would probably say, you know, how have values changed, that sort of thing? You know, past values versus modernity. Next one, knowledge and planning versus spontaneity. What do you think? Yes or no? I would say absolutely yes, right? Harrison Bergeron, he spontaneously decides to do this, right? If he had planned, he could have maybe become emperor, but what did he do? He just like, nah, I'm just going to do this right here on television, and then he got killed, right? So it shows what happens if you don't properly plan. So I definitely would say, you know, knowledge, planning versus spontaneity. Right? Be careful when you are spontaneous. Right? What about morals and values? Yes, absolutely. I mean, this is the whole story is morals and values. Truth versus deception. I don't know. Identity.